The most approachable, the most informative, the most entertaining, and the absolute best radio show across the country, coast to coast. This is your humble D.C. correspondent, Griff Jenkins, filling in for Brian Kilmeade on the great Brian Kilmeade Show. So many things happening in the world today, so much to talk about, but I want to go right to our guest now. We are fortunate to have the great congressman from Kentucky, Andy Barr. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, specifically that committee on the strategic competition between the U.S. and Chinese Communist Party. Congressman Barr, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Griff, how are you doing?
It is great to talk to you, my friend. And, I want to drill into, as you know, and many of our listeners know, for years I've covered the border, and the border is more secure than it's ever been. But a problem that continues to exist, albeit the fight is getting much stronger against it, are the fentanyl that's coming across the border in record droves and killing hundreds of thousands of Americans, innocent Americans, many of them in overdoses. I've interviewed the present and former DEA administrators. I've gone to the DEA headquarters. I've walked the halls of the Faces of Fentanyl, a monument that just pays tribute to those Americans who have lost lives. And Congressman, just today, you've been tweeting about the DEA says most fentanyl is sourced in China and that fentanyl causes almost 7 out of 10 overdose deaths in Kentucky. You have a bill just passed that tackles this head on. Explain.
Well, exactly, Griff. We're still cleaning up the mess left for us by Joe Biden and his open border policies, and his border czar Kamala Harris. And really the problem, among the many problems with an open border, was that Chinese fentanyl producers were colluding with the cartels, taking advantage of our open border to import their poison into our country and into Kentucky. No, Kentucky's not on the physical border, but if you talk to the Kentucky narcotics officers, they will tell you that the open southern border was directly responsible for the deaths of many Kentuckians over the last several years because of all of that fentanyl pouring across our border. And you're exactly right. Drug overdoses have been the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 45 for several years now. 70%, 7 out of 10, as you pointed out, directly tied to fentanyl. And what we have been doing in the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition with China is identifying the source of the precursors of this deadly fentanyl, and it's China.
No doubt. And great work, Congressman, on this legislation to really try and crack down. It's interesting, the host of this show, Brian Kilmeade, this morning on Fox and Friends was interviewing the Defense Secretary Hegseth, talking a little bit about that remarkable video we've now all seen of the taking out of a Venezuelan Trinidad drug runner fast boat. And Brian sort of alluded to the ties that we might see, as you point out, between cartels, Venezuela and China. Listen to this here.
Are you worried about China and their relationship with Venezuela, and how will that affect our policy?
No, the only person that should be worried is Nicolas Maduro, who's running effectively as a kingpin of a narco state, not actually elected and indicted for $50 million by the United States. And we know he's involved in the types of drug running that has affected the American people directly. So China and other countries are going to say certain things, and that's their prerogative. What we have there in the Caribbean is a clear demonstration of military might. President Trump has shown, whether it's the southwest border, whether it's the Houthis in freedom of navigation, whether it's Midnight Hammer in Iran, that the precise application of American power can have incredible impacts and reshape dynamics around the world and in the region. So Nicolas Maduro, as he considers whether or not he wants to continue to be a narco trafficker, has some decisions to make, and that's all I'll say about that.
And, of course, as we know, the first Trump administration, Congressman, indicted Nicolas Maduro as the leader of the Cartel de los Soles, the Cartel of the Suns, for being a narco-terrorist and drug trafficker. Your reaction there, though, to Secretary Hegseth's comments?
Yeah, Secretary Hegseth is exactly right that we have a commander-in-chief now that is restoring deterrence, whether it's in obliterating Iran's nuclear capability or taking on both the narco-terrorists from Venezuela and the Chinese manufacturers of this poison and working with Tren de Aragua and other cartels. You know, the bill that we passed yesterday, the Stop Chinese Fentanyl Act, would apply crushing sanctions on Chinese entities and government officials that fail to take steps to prevent opioid trafficking. And what we found out in our investigation was that the Chinese Communist Party directly subsidizes the manufacturing and export of illicit fentanyl materials and synthetic narcotics. They give grants to these manufacturers, and they even hold ownership interest in these companies that are tied to drug trafficking. So this will help the Trump administration get tough on China when it comes to the sourcing of these materials. But then the strike that you mentioned yesterday that Secretary Hegseth was talking about and Secretary Rubio, you know, this shows a commander-in-chief who is willing to use the full might of the U.S. military to deter this drug trafficking into the United States. And I applaud the commander-in-chief for using the U.S. military. And remember, this shouldn't be a surprise to Maduro. It shouldn't be a surprise to the cartels like Tren de Aragua, because the president properly so designated these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations in February. He deployed 3 warships to the southern Caribbean region, and he gave all the warning in the world to this cartel. He took out 11 narco-terrorists and sent a very powerful signal of deterrence. So it's not only securing the border, it's projecting power through sanctions on China and also in the Caribbean. This president is protecting the American people from this poison that was pouring in across our open southern border under Joe Biden.
And Congressman, before we run out of time, I do want to get your thoughts on one other thing. As a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we're seeing today Vladimir Putin meeting with President Xi and North Korea's Kim Jong-un all getting together. In fact, President Trump was asked about whether he was concerned about that yesterday at the White House. Listen here.
China's having a massive military parade that President Putin and Kim Jong-un will be attending. Do you interpret that as a challenge to this? And are you concerned at all about those countries?
No.
Trying to be some sort of counterweight?
Not at all. China needs us, and I have a very good relationship with President Xi, as you know, but China needs us much more than we need them. No, I don't see that at all, no.
But they're all getting together. Clearly, there's optics of that. Congressman, your thoughts on that?
Well, it's obviously a response to a restoration of peace through strength. It's a response by these authoritarian regimes of American strength returning to the world stage. I mean, here you have a new commander-in-chief of the United States who has not only obliterated Iran's nuclear program, but has restored tough sanctions on Russia, has put secondary sanctions on India's oil purchases, which is really that plus Chinese energy purchases of Russia is what's funded Putin's war machine. The fact that this president has required more of our NATO allies in terms of their defense spending, this is a restoration of deterrence, and it's bringing Putin to the negotiating table. Remember what happened just a couple of weeks ago. President Trump brought Putin to Alaska, U.S. territory, U.S. soil that used to be Russian soil and is no longer Russian soil, and enticed Putin to walk down a row of F-22 stealth fighters and flew a B-2 stealth bomber, nuclear capable B-2 bomber over his head with F-35s flying over top of him, projecting additional strength. Of course you see authoritarians running to each other because they know that they're dealing with a renewed, strong America.
There are optics in that, indeed. Kentucky's Congressman Andy Barr, as always, it's great to have you on, Congressman. Thank you for taking time to join us.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
These particular drugs were probably headed to Trinidad or some other country in the Caribbean, at which point they just contribute to the instability these countries are facing. So the president's been very clear that he's going to use the full power of America and the full might of the United States to take on and eradicate these drug cartels, no matter where they're operating from and no matter how long they've been able to act with impunity. Those days are over.
Those days are over. That was Secretary of State Marco Rubio talking about the strike off the Venezuelan coast, taking out that Venezuelan drug-running boat. This is Griff Jenkins, your humble D.C. correspondent, filling in for Brian Kilmeade on the Brian Kilmeade Show. And we are so lucky right now to have my colleague, my friend, and actually we share an office next to each other, Correspondent Lucas Tomlinson, joining us to talk a little bit about this. And Lucas, I don't think our listeners really know what I know about you, which is not only did you graduate from the Naval Academy, not only did you honorably serve our country in the Navy for 6 years, but you actually at one point were deployed on a missile-guided frigate in the Caribbean on a drug interdiction mission. Talk to us.
I sure was. First of all, it's great to join you, Griff. Thanks for having me on. In 2003, we did a counter-drug deployment to the Caribbean, went through the Panama Canal, just like some of these warships that we're seeing sent by the Trump administration. You saw the USS Lake Erie, the guided missile cruiser, crossing the ditch, as they call it, the Panama Canal. A lot has changed, I'll say, between that deployment back in 2003 and today. Back then, we had a law enforcement detachment on board, and the idea was to disable these go-faster speedboats, the drug boats carrying cocaine from South America. And even though the secretary was saying they're going to Trinidad, ultimately the drugs, of course, are going to make their way to the United States.
Right.
We're seeing the Pentagon issue shoot-to-kill orders. When that drug boat was destroyed, and President Trump shared the unclassified drone video, that was destroyed by Hellfire missiles. It's not clear whether it was from a drone or perhaps from a helicopter. That's a different marching orders. Back in 2003, it was about disabling the vessel. Coast Guard law enforcement detachment on board would detain the individuals. They were, chained to the mast essentially on the O2 level, and they were, put on a Coast Guard vessel back to the United States to stand trial. We knew something was up back in February when the Trump administration put Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang, on the foreign terrorist organization list. That's essentially the kill list in Pentagon argot.
Right.
Those groups, those terrorist groups are now, first of all, they're now terrorist groups, and they're also ripe for assassination. So what we're seeing now, we heard it from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth this morning on Fox and Friends, the mission is to kill these terrorists and to stop the drugs from coming into the United States. And that's what we saw. We also heard from Secretary Rubio. You played a clip there. He says they're going to wage combat on the cartels. He didn't say wage law enforcement. I think our listeners know when you wage combat on somebody, that means to kill them.
That's such a great insight and such a unique perspective. And by the way, I was telling Lucas that I was channeling him as best I could yesterday when Fox and Friends asked me to do a wall walk, as we call it, where I've got to explain that these now 4 missile-guided destroyers are in the waters off Venezuela and using acronyms like the helicopters, as you mentioned, the LAMPs, and I had to explain on the air, these are the light airborne multi-purpose systems. No one calls them that. They're called LAMPs, and it's really remarkable stuff. And, you mentioned Secretary Hegseth talking this morning on Fox and Friends. I do want to play just a little bit of that for you, Lucas. Great. Cut 17. Listen here.
I can tell you that was definitely not artificial intelligence. I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. And that was Tren de Aragua, a narco-terrorist organization designated by the United States trying to poison our country with illicit drugs. Last year, under the Biden administration, all 4 years, 100,000 Americans died from drug-related, from drugs, from the use of drugs, many of which poured in from Central and South America through our southwest border. Now, we're sealing the border, but President Trump is willing to go on offense in ways that others have not been, and to send that clear signal to Tren de Aragua, Cartel del Sols, and others emanating from Venezuela. We're not going to allow this kind of activity. You're poisoning our people. We've got incredible assets, and they are gathering in the region. So you want to try to traffic drugs? It's a new day. It's a different day. And so those 11 drug traffickers are no longer with us, sending a very clear signal that this is an activity the United States is not going to tolerate.
So a lot to unpack there, Griff. He is, in essence, saying the orders were to shoot to kill. The 11 are no longer with us. The president is going on offense. He He didn't say go on defense. This isn't about arresting and detaining the drug smugglers. And typically, I'll just walk you through one interdiction I was a part of. What they do is they set the boat on fire. They, 30 bales of cocaine. They jump in the water knowing the U.S. military is going to fish them out of the water. But then you're spending hours on the high seas trying to put the fire out. Kind of ironic because it's sitting there in the Caribbean, right?
Yeah.
But I think in my service record, it's documented that I've ingested like 30 bales of cocaine in my life. So I don't know if that explains a few things, Griff, or maybe to our viewers. But I remember when it was put in there. Anyway, this is just, I cannot stress enough, a completely different modus operandi. This is a complete change for the Pentagon. There's no way those 3 Guided Missile Destroyers, the Guided Missile Cruiser, Lake Erie, was brought in from the Pacific, through the ditch, through the Panama Canal. There's even an attack submarine, okay? The USS Newport News is lurking in the Caribbean. We forget that. There's the USS Iwo Jima. That's an amphibious assault ship that carries over 2,000 Marines. I saw some video today. They're doing some air assault training in Puerto Rico today, okay? These forces are not there.
And that could be boots on the ground.
100%. Have you seen Clear and Present Danger? I'm kind of dating myself. This is a 30-year-old movie.
You did. So I was saving that. I want to get.
Oh, excuse me.
When we first came in, Lucas gets credit for saying, it reminds me of this movie. I think we've got a little sound of that for you.
Some say the greatest threat to America.
These drug cartels represent a clear and present danger to the national security of the United States.
Comes from other nations. Some say the greatest threat to America.
The course of action I'd suggest is a course of action I can't suggest.
Comes from within.
So you see a parallel.
There is a parallel. Now, where there is a striking difference is this isn't deniable operations. This is not the CIA going in there right now. This is the President of the United States saying minutes ago we just destroyed, annihilated this drug-carrying speedboat carrying cocaine from Venezuela eventually to the United States. We heard the defense secretary. No one's denying this. That movie, though, was from 1994, based on a famous New York Times best-selling book by Tom Clancy, of course, about the U.S. government putting special forces on the ground in Colombia. They fire a missile from an F-18 Super Hornet. I actually don't even think they had. Yeah, they had Super Hornets back then. I think it was the Charlie version, but let's not get in the weeds. A missile destroyed a cartel leader. And I turned to Griff, actually weeks ago, to be fair, I called this. I said, the United States is going to start droning cartel leaders, and certainly we've seen a start going after this drug boat.
Lucas, stay there. Griff Jenkins in for the Brian Kilmeade Show. We'll be back with more Tomlinson. This is the great Brian Kilmeade Show. Your D.C. correspondent, Griff Jenkins, filling in, but really a special treat to have my colleague and office next-door neighbor, Lucas Tomlinson, joining us, because if you're just joining us, Lucas not only is one of the finest correspondents in the Washington, D.C. Bureau, but also a graduate of the Naval Academy, served 6 years honorably in the Navy, and was deployed on a missile-guided frigate in a drug interdiction operation. And just picking up where we left off, Lucas, so the point you're making is, I think, so significant, which is from what you were doing in 2003 is so different from a law enforcement perspective to now it is a shoot-to-kill mission. And everyone watching this video are like, wow. And as we were saying, it's got this tie to, what we see in that movie, Clear and Present Danger. But where does this go? Like, do you think we're going to see a lot more of this?
I do, and perhaps not just on the high seas. I mean, there's a lot of firepower. You don't put 3 guided missile destroyers, a guided missile cruiser, an attack submarine, also armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles. By the way, so each one of those warships I just mentioned could carry 30 plus, depending on loadout, 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles. We've seen what those did to Iran's nuclear facilities. Remember that guided missile submarine fired 30 cruise missiles into Iran.
Right.
We've seen the Tomahawks over the years. I don't think we have to tell our viewers what a Tomahawk is. Those carry a high explosive warhead. Those Tomahawks are not for firing on the high seas. They're for hitting targets ashore. So what's coming? We don't like to speculate in our business, but we're on the radio, have some time. There could be strikes in Venezuela. You cannot rule it out. I don't have anything in my notebook on that, but you don't assemble this armada. You have over 2,000 Marines aboard USS Iwo Jima. There's a couple other amphibs down there off the coast of Venezuela. Some of them are doing air assaults in Puerto Rico, training. What are they training for? But clearly, as we saw with the drone strike in the Caribbean, this isn't just a show of force. The mission has changed. Not just 20 years ago, what I was doing in the Caribbean, up till last week. The goal was always disable the vessel, sniper fires a bullet, disable the engine, interdict, arrest the terror suspects aboard these boats, the drug dealers, but then try them in the United States. Now they're killing them. Big difference.
Well, and, we don't speculate in our business as correspondents, as journalists, but you do try and read the tea leaves a little bit. And your point is so well taken that you don't put that kind of firepower down in that region if there's not some sort of stronger plan afoot. And also, you're hearing immediately after this one little boat taken out that killed 11 TDA guys, a little fast boat, you immediately heard very strong rhetoric from SecDef, Hegseth, from
going
Marco
on offense.
Rubio. Not just the president talking about it. You saw
this is a policy shift.
This is a policy shift indeed. Hey, listen, so in full disclosure, just to shift gears for a moment, so in the hallways and in the offices, which are adjacent between myself and Lucas, we are often talking about sports. And in our studio, if anyone can see on the stream, but if not, I'll describe it for you, there's a small replica helmet of the heyday, the great days of the Washington Redskins, now known as the Commanders. And while I could not be more ecstatic, as is Lucas, to see the Commanders and Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, now Deebo Samuel, take the field and hopefully destroy the Giants. Fight for old DC. It was my colleague Lucas who put it on the map, the first guy to ask President Trump, hey, Mr. President, what about going back to the Redskins name? You asked him.
I did. It was 4th of July weekend. We flew on Air Force One with the president up to New Jersey, where he was spending the weekend after the fireworks display at the White House. And we were on our way back. We were sitting there on the ramp. The turbines are spinning under the wing there on Air Force One. The president comes, and we got through the news of the day. But as you know, Griff, the president, he'll sit there and take questions forever. So you better have a deep, bank of questions to choose from. And for the life of me, everything that was asked, news of day was asked. And then I just asked him, if the D.C. City Council doesn't vote to approve this new stadium, which at the time they hadn't, will you step in? Which maybe also a little foreshadowing taking over Washington, as we've seen recently, certainly with the police force and crime. The president said he's looking to do that. He credited Josh Harris, owner of the Redskins, or the Commanders, and then, without even thinking, like I just did, I just blurt out, Mr. President, should the Commanders change the name back to Redskins? And he just looks at me and goes, do you want me to say something controversial? And I just gave him go for it. Yeah. We asked the questions. It's easy, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, I would. And then he probably had one of the most political answers of his time back in the White House. He goes, but winning changes everything. Commanders are winning, doing very well. Obviously, we're one win away from the Super Bowl last year, playing for an NFC title. But then he circled back to, but I would. He goes, it just doesn't have the same ring to me. And I think most Redskins fans, Commanders fans would probably say the same thing.
Yes.
Although he did make a point, not to sound political myself, but winning does have a way of changing things. And certainly the season we saw last year with Jaden Daniels at the helm, new coach Dan Quinn, new general manager, Adam Peters, and what he did to get Terry McLaurin re-signed, I thought was brilliant. Yeah. Not only did they get him back and extended him, but you notice they gave him a day of big press, big headlines, this massive extension, $96 million. It wasn't until the day later, though, that the details of the deal came out. It's actually just 2 years guaranteed, and only, if you don't mind me saying this, and nobody breaks their radio, only $44 million guaranteed.
Only $44 million.
But the 2 year, I could live off that.
My goodness.
Certainly in Loudoun County, in Leesburg.
Yes, look.
The fact that we got only 2 years guaranteed, $44 million. Now there's space to obviously got to extend Jaden Daniels, our star quarterback, eventually.
Oh, yeah. No, he's not going anywhere. We're keeping him.
Right. So you can't just spend all the money on everybody else. So we're excited. At the Giants this weekend.
So, I have no inside knowledge, and neither do you, but I would not be surprised if there is a return to the Redskins name. I really wouldn't, because not only did you put that into play for our listeners, so I built upon that.
And Griff, you brought it back. Can I just say
about it on Fox and Friends? And what happens? President Trump goes on a tweet storm on Truth Social.
And Charlie Hurt as well.
Charlie
mentioned
Hurt
the Indians with Cleveland.
The Indians, and now that's in play. We shall see. And to the president's point about
thank you for that, Griff, because it gave me elements all Sunday when I was at the White House, where I saw these things fired up. I'm like, that's our story now. Shift fire.
We shall see.
Shift your rudder.
But winning does change everything. However, I think the through and through lifelong Washington fans would love to win and also return to that Redskins glory. We shall see. In the final moments I've got, what do you see as the Commanders' season? You think we really are going to get back to possibly playoffs, possibly win?
We'll get back to the playoffs. That's not a bold prediction, of course, but it's going to be tough for this year. Last year we played a 4-win schedule. Every year in the National Football League, your schedule is based on how you did the year before. So last year we played a 4-win schedule. This year we play a 12-win schedule. So we are playing Green Bay, we're playing, Detroit. We have some tough competition. We play the Chiefs. Now we're playing on primetime a bunch, which is nice. But again, in the spotlight, Thursday night games, Monday night games, it's going to be a much tougher schedule. I'm still going to make a bold prediction here. You can run this back, 11 wins.
11 wins.
Mm-hmm. So small step back from
Super
last
Bowl?
year. Super Bowl is going to be tough.
Super Bowl is going to be tough.
I'll just leave it there.
All right, I bet you $20 we make it to the Super Bowl.
Oh, you're making me root against
We're putting this
Commanders?
on record. It is September 3rd. You heard it here.
Okay.
Griff Jenkins challenging Lucas Tomlinson, $20. I
Couple
say
pints at
Commanders
Martin's Tavern.
Make it to the Super Bowl. We'll play this back on February 3rd and see what sort of result we have.
We'll see you next year, Griff. But I'm not going to root against the Commanders. This will be the happiest money I ever donate.
That's right.
If I have to.
It'll go straight to pints at the Dubliner.
I just don't want to jinx anything.
Lucas Tomlinson, D.C. correspondent with a lot of experience in so many stories, particularly what we're seeing with the president, the Trump administration, taking on the drug cartels and Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. This is Griff Jenkins filling in for Brian Kilmeade. We'll be back. It is the Brian Kilmeade Show with your humble D.C. correspondent, Griff Jenkins, trying to pinch hit as best I can. And boy, are we honored and privileged to have our next guest on now, Michael Larosa, the former press secretary to First Lady Jill Biden. He is one of the smartest Democrats I know, a friend in full disclosure, and he has a piece up on foxnews.com right now that I would submit to you. Every single Democrat in the country, particularly those running in an election in the near days and months and years to come, because it is really drilling on the fact that the Democrats are in the wilderness. They don't have the right message, and the opinion piece is titled, "It's Not the Economy, Stupid, Democrats' Real Path Out of the Wilderness." Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's great. This piece, honestly, I mean, I'm not just blowing smoke. Every Democrat needs to hear this. I was recently listening, Michael, to Fox has a kind of archive audio thing they do from time to time, and they were playing a clip from former President Bill Clinton and his one of his State of the Union speeches where he talked about every American, the boundless hopes and endless dreams should be for every American, and it all starts back, he says, from a little guy from Hope, Arkansas. And it struck me because you drill in this piece about, for decades, James Carville's old mantra, "It's the economy, stupid," isn't the right thing. You write, "Today my party is jumping onto a shiny substitute considered to be the winning message that unites all: affordability," as if the idea that lower prices are better than higher ones is a revelation. Has a candidate ever campaigned on the reverse? You nail it. You absolutely nail it. Tell me about this piece and what the message is to your fellow Democrats.
So the message is that there can't be just one message or one messenger, because this isn't a presidential election that we're coming up on. Democrats want power. They want to take back power. They want to use the power for oversight. And if they want to do that, you can't have what works in New Jersey and the suburbs of Los Angeles won't work in the suburbs of Tallahassee or Tampa or Illinois, wherever we're going to target our seats. And the point is that these races need to be run so that candidates represent their districts, and they have to go where the conversations are having. People aren't having conversations about charts and stats when they feel a certain way. And I feel like we've lost the sort of the gut for perception and what people are feeling on the ground. It was really Roger Ailes who, in his book "You Are the Message," said it best. You are the message. There is no other way around it. You represent the change that people are going to be voting for. And people keep forgetting that change versus more of the same was the first rule of James Carville's message board. It wasn't the economy, stupid. That was second, followed by don't forget about healthcare. And if we keep getting in the way of somebody who's trying to deliver change just for the sake of opposing him because he's Trump, we're going to lose, because we're going to look like we don't want to do anything at all.
Yeah. I think one of the most poignant lines you have in your piece that's up on foxnews.com right now, Mike, is the line where you say, "Are Democrats so disconnected from reality that we've unlearned the most basic political principle of all, that perception and politics go hand in glove?" And you're certainly seeing that on the, I think, crime front, where you can give every stat about crime being down and record lows and the murder rates going down. But then you talk to people in cities like DC, Chicago, New York, LA, and they don't feel that. They're not feeling what those stats are saying, but yet so many Democrats can continue to basically, try and cling to the statistics despite it not being reality for the actual residents who live there.
Yeah, people just want to feel safe. As Roger Ailes once said, people don't always want to feel informed, but they want to, people don't always want to be informed. They want to feel informed. It's the same thing with politics. People don't want to be overwhelmed with stats. They want you to just feel safe. Right now, because Trump is acting, they feel safer, at least in Washington, where I am. People feel safer because the National Guard is on the street. That doesn't mean it's going to solve the problem or it's going to tackle the root of what's driving crime. But in the meantime, it makes people feel protected in their communities. And if you oppose that, they're going to ask why. And if you give some constitutional, legal, fluffy pablum, they're going to roll their eyes and say, that sounds like a politician who doesn't get me. Bill Clinton didn't lose a re-election by putting 100,000 cops on the streets. And
No.
Joe Biden won 3 of his re-elections after he wrote the bill putting 100,000 cops on the streets. We can be for law enforcement. We don't have to knee-jerk oppose it.
It's a great point. And before I run out of time, I want to dive into one more thing, and that is you write in your piece this as well, which I loved. Trump dives headfirst into every news cycle, runs into every cultural fire, from campus protests to celebrity dust-ups like Sydney Sweeney's jeans or Cracker Barrel's new logo. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't duck. Love him or hate him, voters can't miss that he shows up with an opinion and a position. He doesn't keep them guessing, you right. And, that's such a insightful line. And you look at Democrats really everywhere. And about the only guy that seems to be trying to do that is Gavin Newsom. What do you say?
I think you're right. I think, who knows if Gavin Newsom is going to be the next nominee. But he certainly has a formula, at least for the moment. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of different Democrats try to out Gavin Newsom and try to resist Trump as more attention goes towards Chicago. I think you're going to see Governor Pritzker's star rise amongst Democrats. But look, we don't need to replicate Trump. We just need to have guts like Trump. We just need to have an opinion on something. I go back to this line that Chris Christie used in like 2012, I think, when he was criticizing Obama. I was a producer at the time, but I loved using it. He was just like, what the hell are we paying you for if you don't have a position on something yet? It's
That's
just
great.
People
It's such a great line. It's such a great line. We're up against a hard break, but it's been great having you. Michael Larosa, the opinion piece is up. It's called It's Not the Economy, Stupid, Democrats' Real Path Out of the Wilderness. Go and read it. Mike, thanks for taking time.